Hi, everyone. Welcome to Build. I'm Ethan Alter, and we're going to be chatting with the cast of For Life, which premieres tonight at 10 p.m. on ABC. The series is inspired by the real-life story of Isaac Wright Jr., who studied law in prison and overturned his own conviction, eventually becoming a licensed attorney. Please welcome the cast. We have the real Isaac Wright Jr. right here. We also have Nicholas Pinnock, who's playing his surrogate on the show, Aaron. And then we have series showrunner Hank Steinberg, an EP. And then we have Timothy Busfield, co-star. Thanks for coming out today, guys. It's great to have you here. So, Isaac, let's start with you. What's it like to see your life story turned into this series? And
It's been very surreal. I mean, one of the most profound things is to, for the first time, to be able to watch my suffering as a third party. You know, when you're fighting, you don't pay too much attention to what you're going through. But now, you know, I've had the chance to watch Nicholas in action and to be able to actually see, you know, what I was going through at the time.
Nicholas, take us to your first meeting with Isaac, the first time you met him. What stuck out to you right away as you were sort of just speaking with him?
He had a really amazing presence, and that was something that I was hoping to grab an essence of and give to my depiction of Aaron.
How much would you say of Isaac is in Aaron, as you were sort of craft? Because you are creating a character while also paying homage to the real person. So
I think that's a question for Isaac.
Well, I can say that, you know, in writing the script and meeting with Isaac for hours, and he really walked me through what it was all about, what prison was like, what his experience was like. I think I channeled Isaac into everything that Aaron is experiencing, that desperation and the drive, the courage, and everything that's in there about the long game and him planning ahead and seeing that he could get out, but having to play it years ahead. That's all from Isaac.
Right. Watching Aaron, as Nicholas said, how much do you recognize yourself in the character, and how much did Nicholas make it his own person?
It was a little scary, actually.
Mm-hmm.
He was so me that I had to kind of do a double take. I mean, is that really me? You know, it's that thing where you say that he's doing it, he's incorporating the character or incorporating my essence in the character so well that you really question it, because it's just that good. And you know, he and I spent a lot of time together. We talked a lot about, you know, what I went through, about my essence, about the way in which I moved through the courtroom and the way in which I practice law. And you know, he just got it. Even down to, you know, wearing my jewelry. He wanted that character not to just act like me. He wanted that character to be me. Mm-hmm. And he went far beyond the call of duty. He did his thing. Right. I'm really impressed with it and happy about it.
Mm-hmm. Is it nice to hear that, Nicholas, hearing Isaac?
It's the biggest compliment I could have, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Hank, for you, when this story came your way, what were the things you wanted to preserve in Isaac's? Now, you touched on some of them, but what was so important to you about telling his story in this way?
Well, when I heard the story, I saw that it was such a compelling story that had the triumph of the human spirit in it, and the idea of this one man going up against this enormous system, the institutions, and that through that story of a man that you could root for, that you could get behind, you could see his struggles, feel his pain and his passion, and also he's a very complicated character, which is what's going to make it be really rich, interesting drama, that we could also tell a story, that we could examine, you know, some issues in our country, the criminal justice system, the penal system. I mean, I remember there was one day when we were shooting at Westchester County Prison, and we were all we had the monitors where we were watching the takes, and there were about 5 of us sitting in, you know, those director chairs, and we were kind of crammed in, and it was okay, and then they closed the door, and within about 90 seconds, we were all getting really, really anxious. Just that feeling of being in that space, and we knew we could just call to someone and open the door, and still it was so intense. And then, of course, it was a bit traumatic for Isaac, and after that he was outside
Yeah, I had to leave.
outside the cell after that. But
Right.
the dehumanizing feeling of that powerlessness, even just it wasn't even real, and we felt it, and that was so powerful to be able to go to the real prisons and shoot in those spaces and feel what it's like. And it's just, I don't care what you did, no one should be put into a box that is 3 feet wide by 6 feet long. It just is inhumane.
I spent 7.5 years in a cell smaller than that, and it still affected me when those doors closed. And so it's not something that obviously that you can ever get used to, but the extent of the agony, it just never leaves you.
Were you able to be on set often? Did you come and go?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, I was on set. I mean, I've been involved from the time I first met Hank, and we sat down, and his creative juices was flowing. I actually learned a lot from him about how these shows are put together, the process that it goes through, and so I was prepared from day one, specifically because of Hank, and from that moment, even down to seeing the scripts, giving suggestions and being on set doing the same thing. I've been pretty intimately involved.
Yeah, I would call him and say, Isaac, I need Aaron to have an obstacle here with this witness in the pilot. What's a thing that guards could do to screw with him? Right. And he said, well, they could lock it down in the middle of his interview, and that's in the show. That's in the pilot. Yeah. When we were on set filming, we were at a different prison. We were at Queens Detention Center, and we were doing the scene where Aaron comes in. And it actually wasn't in the script, that whole thing of cough, squat, and that mouth sequence, which just shows you how dehumanizing it is for them. Even this character has gotten his law license. He's out, in the world. He's had somebody, say that he's of worthy, moral structure and has passed his test, and yet he has to go through that dehumanizing thing. That was all Isaac on the day on the set saying, this is the process. George Tillman, our amazing director of the pilot, shot it, and I was like, oh, wow, this is cool. That wasn't, and then, it ended up being such a key part of that first 2 minutes of the pilot.
Timothy, for you, you play a sort of a former lawyer who helps Aaron try and clear his name. Is your character based on anyone specific? Or what did you model it after as you were building him?
I don't know. I mean, that whether he was based on someone specific or not, I don't know. I mean, my job is I'm a supporting character for him and a lawyer, and I've learned so much. What I really, my takeaway from the beginning hasn't been, I'll bring my knowledge to this. Right. It's been, oh my God, so much like the political system that we're in now. It's all about the win. Mm-hmm. It's all about the win, and prosecutors got to put somebody in jail, and even if it's the wrong person. My character has a beautiful speech at one point. He talks about how it starts with something small with a lawyer, and it's not worth losing over. So you fudge, and you win, and everybody tells you what a great job you did, and you think this is the way it's supposed to be. So you start fudging. You start withholding evidence. You start taking witnesses and not bringing them forward. And our political system is that way now, and I think humanity is seeing with our political system, it's all about the win when you have the votes split on party lines, and I think people are going, hey, and I'm going, wow. I watched Perry Mason. Right. I thought these were good people. Right. The district attorney isn't necessarily your friend here, and somebody's got to go to jail. And I am here to help Aaron's character through being his paralegal or whatever I can be, to understand the system out there is different than what the idealistic lawyer in him might see. Right. So I can bring that, none of which I could have prepared for from being a real guy.
I mean, Isaac can speak to, there was a state Supreme Court justice who identified Isaac in prison in the same fashion as this character, Henry Roswell. We shifted from a former judge to a former state senator and created some other things about the character to make it more interesting. His character is actually trying to pay penitence through the bad deeds that he has done over 25 years of being in the system to try to help Aaron. And I don't think that's the case with the gentleman that helped Isaac, but Isaac can speak to that.
Yeah, it was actually a retired New Jersey Supreme Court justice named Virginia Long, and there's two distinct issues with the way I learned the law. I mean, lawyers are very important. Obviously, there's a fictionalized version of that interaction between Aaron and Roswell, but there's a reality in the sense that I could not learn how to be a lawyer when I wasn't a lawyer without actually studying other lawyers, without interacting with them, without picking up the good parts of them, throwing away the bad, and creating more good stuff to go along with it. And so, you know, at that level, and moving through that process, there was always lawyers around me that I learned from. Virginia Long is significant. Justice Long is significant in the sense that once I went another 7 years, 7.5 years in prison, another 7 years pursuing a law degree. Once I passed the bar, I was investigated for 9 more years by the Committee on Character before giving me a license. And it was Supreme Court Justice Virginia Long that stepped in. She actually decided a civil case while she was still on the bench. So she knew who I was, and she knew the situation when she retired. When I reached out to her, she came in. She works for a very prestigious international law firm. And, you know, there was this conflict, and her husband was her partner. So instead of her going before the Supreme Court saying, listen, stop the nonsense, give this guy his license, her husband went before the Supreme Court. That's her. And said, stop the nonsense, give this guy his license. And they did.
So something that I really like about the show is the way it depicts that there are people within the system as much as it's people are working against you and against Aaron in the show. There are people who do choose to help. So the story shows that, for example, the warden on the show is very encouraging of Aaron, and that seems to be a reminder that there are people who can actually do what's right when the time comes.
Well, I'm sitting here because people in the system changed the wrong. Mm-hmm. They reversed it. That's the reason why I'm sitting here. And I always say, I say this all the time, you know, we have, there's this air and conversation about the system, and there's a lot of negative talk about the system in general. But I was a victim of the system, so it's important for me to say this, and that is, we have in this country the best system in the world. And this is a victim of the system saying this, okay? It is the people running the system. Remember that, because when you talk about the system, you're refocusing away from the real problem, and that's people. It is the people in the system that brings havoc to our system. Right? When you look at this country, you have 2 constitutional protections. The United States Constitution, and every single state has their own constitution. With all of that protection, there shouldn't be innocent people going to prison. There shouldn't be people getting 30 years for stealing a bicycle. Okay? The reason why that's happening is because there are people in place that does not have the honesty, the integrity, and the morality to run a system like ours. It's a very special system. Okay? And the people that came here were disenfranchised. This country was started by the disenfranchised. So they set the system up to give power to the people. When these people then get in power, they take it away from the common man. All right? And so that's very, very, very important for all of us to understand, that it is not the system. It is the people running the system that cause these problems.
Yeah, it's right. We talk a lot about the system being broken, but I think that's not specific enough. I think it's the culture within the system, right? The system as it's written, if you're just about the law, the Constitution, that's all fine. Right. And that's what we hope we can bring to this dialogue, is to discuss the culture that exists within the system, right? If you talk about what's happening in our political system, it's not the Constitution that's the problem. It's the culture within the political system that is the problem. And there's also an interesting paradox, which is, in a sense, systems are, in a way, larger than people. And so if you can come into a system or a culture within a system with the best of intentions, and you're like Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill, which is the character, Aaron's character, but also in a way the warden's character, played by Indira Varma, who's, you'll see as the series goes on, she has the best of intentions, but she has one hand tied behind her back, And that's, I think, and Nicholas can speak to the interesting dynamic between those two characters.
Yeah, there's very much a need for each other, a dependency. He needs to continue his fight to get back to his family, get out of jail. He needs to be able to get to court in the first place. And she needs to know what's going on in the prison. And so there's a kind of, there's a mutual exchange between the two of them and a mutual respect, which is why they manage to help each other facilitate what it is that they need. And I think that, throughout the arc of the series, we'll see a really interesting, complex, sometimes personal, sometimes quid pro quo, sometimes real, maternal and paternal relationship between these two people. It goes on a very complex arc that, for me, was really interesting to play and to understand how their necessity for each other facilitates everything that he needs to, get out, basically.
Well, for you, I mean, you've listened to the talk about the American legal system and the justice system. Coming into America to play this part and learn about it, what surprised you versus what's in England? What were some of the different things that you know?
I mean, not a lot surprised me, to be honest. I mean, we've got the internet, there's books nowadays. There's, the information's out there. It's not completely new to me. We're not from an alien planet. Some might say. So not a lot of it was a surprise. What did surprise me was the story, and our other executive producer, Curtis Jackson, will keep saying that, Isaac's not one in a million, he's one. No one had created case law before to help someone else in their kingpin case to then add it to his case to then get to a point where he could actually use that to be exonerated and get out. I mean, it just doesn't happen. Yeah. How deep entrenched the problems were a surprise. I mean, but I think it's the great thing about this show, and I think that Hank managed to bring to the table as far as the world that he's created for the characters to play in, is that it has global appeal because it's not only this country that's dealing with the need for prison reform. That's a global thing, and the more I think this show adds to the conversation, it will highlight those things, But I think the UK legal system needs to be overhauled as well.
Is there a case that you know of that's an analog in the UK to Isaac's? Have you heard?
No, I really don't.
Right.
No.
There's a great scene in the first episode where Aaron has to conspire to get a forged letter done in a short amount of time. It's a very tense moment, and it's one that is very realistic in the moment. And I wonder the kinds of things that you'd have to do, Isaac, in prison, sort of pursue your. And if there is any point you told Hank, no, that's too unbelievable. It's too dramatic, or is it? Do you have to resort to those sorts of things on the inside?
If you take, I don't think it was. I didn't think it was too dramatic when it was done, and there's some realities that is involved in that type of thinking. Mm-hmm. One is that you're when you're moving through the system as an accused or a convict, you're at the mercy of the system. Does a judge have to read your legal briefs when you set it on their table? No, they can rubber stamp it. Mm-hmm. Does once they get you, do they have to let you out? That's not your decision to make. It's someone else's decision. And sometimes political issues and cultural issues, move those decisions instead of pure law. So just to give you an example about the extent that a person has to go to get out when they're there. He mentioned earlier that I made new law. I mean, I had life on the kingpin conviction by itself. And how I got that reversed, but how I had to do it, I literally had to create this new law in another prisoner's case, get his kingpin conviction overturned and released, and then I had to take that new law and use it in my case to overturn my own conviction. Because if I would have put it in on my case, they was going to deny me. I wasn't going to get out. So I had to do that. Now I have the kingpin conviction reversed. I have no life sentence, but I got 70 years on all these other charges. They cut me off at the knees. They saw what I was doing. I got cut off at the knees. What do I have to do now? My appeals is over with. I have to get a police officer, a veteran cop, to confess on the stand. Mm-hmm. All right? And if you understand the extent and the just miraculousness of it, lawyers that's been practicing 30, 40 years, I don't know of any lawyer that has been able to get a police officer to put himself in prison in order to get another person released from prison, voluntarily put himself in prison. And I was able, 7.5 years later, I was just that good. I had gotten just that good that I was able to use certain techniques to get this officer to confess. He broke down, started crying. He said he was holding this in for 7.5 years and just told the story. So if you look at the gymnastics involved in getting released, you can see that what Aaron did just to get the truth, just to get the truth. He did what he did to get the truth, but he had to do that because everywhere he turned, he was being blocked. And that's the reality, of the system. Once you get in, it's almost impossible. And I want to say this real quick because I know there's this air about technicalities. You hear this word in the system, technicalities. Let me just say right now, there is no such thing as a person getting out on a technicality. They have all kinds of harmless error rules in the law that even if your constitutional rights has been violated, because the evidence is so overwhelming, they call it harmless error, and they keep you in, even when there are violations. So there's rules in the law to make sure that people do not get out on technicalities. Anytime you hear that word, no, it doesn't exist in the law.
Yeah, we explore a lot of that in the show. Also, eyewitness testimony, which is generally thought of, intuitively. Oh, I saw that guy, and the eyes don't lie. The eyes lie. They've done the science on it. When people are in an intense situation, a criminal situation, their adrenaline rushes. They actually are in a traumatic state, and their memories are highly unreliable, highly unreliable. And yet there are many people on death row who from one eyewitness saying it, and they may not be lying, but they may just be misremembering. Yeah. And then they're shown a photo, and they think, oh yeah, that's the guy. They're influenced, by the police, and the police not necessarily with the worst of intentions. And that's another thing. It's going to be a big part of the show is, the district attorney that in our show that has put Aaron away absolutely believes he's guilty. He knows they cut some corners, they coerced some witnesses, but in his mind, it was for the greater good. That's more interesting to explore how people within the system can fudge and think that it's okay. The same thing with the eyewitness testimony and the police. This show's not filled with dirty cops. It's filled with people who are making compromises, who believe what they're doing is right, and that's actually much more interesting. It's much more something you can lean into and say that's something that we need to attack, instead of just saying, oh, this is an evil guy who's doing these terrible things, and then you say, oh, well, that's either not real, or that's 1 in a million, or that's not something we have to address.
Absolutely. We're going to turn over to the audience in a minute, but Timothy, really quickly, I wanted to ask you, we know that 30-something is going to be making a return to TV in a little while. What can you tell us about that? Have you done any table reads?
He's double dipping.
It's ABC, thank God. It's a really great script. Ed Zwick and Marshall Herskovitz, the guys that gave us Shakespeare in Love and Courage Under Fire and Legends of the Fall. That's what they went and did when that show ended. So they're great filmmakers. They've written a great script. Ken Olin, Patty, we're all back, and it's our kids are living together and having problems, and you have a bunch of 30-year-olds suffering, and I'll be running back and forth between the sets.
I love 30-something. Can I come play your son?
You're on.
Have you thought about yourself where Elliot has been all this time? Like, were you surprised when you were presented with the script and this is?
I hadn't thought about Elliot, a character I played 30 years ago, and then my wife ordered him up, and I've been watching, and I'm thinking, that's a lot of energy that guy put out. I don't know if I could play this guy anymore. So, she's like, sure you can. So, I'm excited. We're all excited. But right now, we're really excited about this. The reviews are great. The cast is great. Hank is on fire. There's so many. Isaac's got so many stories. I'm really fortunate to be a part of this this show, and I think we got a really good one here.
If 30-something and this take off, could we see the inevitable West Wing reboot? Would you be back for that?
Oh my God, easy. I didn't understand anything I was saying on that show. So to try to learn monologues from with Hank's monologues, I think I'm better.
I love The West Wing. Can I come play your son?
Another good show. I've been lucky.
Do you think you could do West Wing today? Like, what do you think it would be if Aaron Sorkin were to do it?
It's up to Aaron. Hank, I've worked for Hank before on Without a Trace. We really live and die on the writers being on fire. Mm-hmm. On West Wing, they were on fire. And Without a Trace, Hank was on fire. In 61, Hank was on fire. Every show he's done, 9, Last Ship, every one, he's been on fire. Right. We live and die by him being on fire. If Aaron's on fire, we'll all fall in. But it's not an actor-driven medium. This is a writer's medium, and we come from radio into TV, and Hank's on fire, and if Aaron's on fire, the show could work. If they try to make the show without that central writer being on fire, then you look at what we see so often, overdeveloped television, mm-hmm. where the network thinks they can make a hit by putting people in the right spot and forgetting athletically we need our quarterback to be on fire. And here we got classically trained Nicholas Pinnock, who's just killing it. We got Indira
mm-hmm.
Varma. We got real actors on the show with great resumes, rounded actors, and great writing. And
Dorian Missick, Glenn
Bryant,
Fleshler, Mary Stuart Masterson, and
Boris McIver.
Boris McIver.
Yeah.
These are the cast, top to bottom.
Great cast.
And a guy named
Curtis 50 Cent Jackson.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. He's
Who
pretty
delivers his best performance so far.
Right. All right, well, let's turn over to the audience. Who's got a question?
I've been a practicing lawyer in New Jersey for 50 years, and I can't tell you how many questions I have. But one quick comment, it's truly extraordinary that as a convicted felon, you would be admitted to the bar. I can't imagine that could happen, but obviously you did it. My question more broadly, and whenever I watch a lawyer show, a legal system show, I always look at it and say, is that for real, or is it just a dramatic conceit to get something going? How much in this situation did you have to deviate from the facts? You've got a compelling factual story, but I also know you have to run a show and you have to get the eyeballs to watch week after week. How much did you have to deviate from what occurred in order to do that?
Yeah, there are two central things where there's a conceit. In real life, Isaac didn't become an attorney until much later, but he was practicing as a de facto attorney in the prison. He was the prison paralegal. He was handling all the internal cases of the prisons. He was taking on their cases and writing their briefs and guiding them and telling them what to do, but in many cases, he was handing off those briefs to lawyers on the outside who, the inmates were finding on the cheap, and Isaac was the real brains. So in the central conceit of our show, we didn't think it'd be that exciting to see him writing briefs. So, we need him to get out and go to court. But we did research whether that is actually legally possible, and there is a crazy loophole that's described in the pilot of how it could happen, and that's what we've laid out. That's beyond that, we've captured the spirit and the essence of what Isaac was accomplishing. And then the only other thing that is on every legal show is how time is collapsed. Things that take years, in real life sometimes take weeks or months on television. So those are other than that, we have several lawyers on our writing staff. We have Isaac vets every script. And the laws that we talk about, the precedents that are quoted in the show are all real precedents. The case law is all real. The ways that the direct and cross-examinations work, how the judges, give their judgments, that those are all, vetted and on the money.
Another question?
Congratulations on the show.
Thank you.
There's a lot of attention these days with, say, Just Mercy and your story. Do you see that there's a shift going on in this country? It might be a minuscule shift, but do you see like there's a shift? Even someone like Kim Kardashian is also helping to get people out of.
Yeah, that was a surprise, but it was a good surprise. I mean, anybody. First of all, there is a shift, and I think the show is going to be a snowball rolling down the hill, pushing that shift forward. I think because of social media and because of the way technology has changed, I think that more and more people are beginning to realize what the system is about, how it actually works, what it means to have rights and how to utilize those rights in your favor, and the reality of some of the tragedies that we face moving through the system. And so I think that wave has been created before this show, and I think we're just a part of that wave, and we will be moving that way forward. This show was going to move that way forward, but that shift is here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Be a part of that wave tonight when For Life premieres at 10 p.m. on ABC. Thank you so much to Isaac Wright, Nicholas
Thank
Pinnock,
you.
Hank Steinberg, and Timothy Busfield coming in today.
Thank you.
Thank you.